Bez Hashem, today's daf is Masech Chullin Daf Lamed Beis 32. Hold on. Okay, and we will begin from Daf Lamed Aleph Amid Beis. That's Hechidami Nidish and Ensa V'Tavla. Okay, so it's about like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines from the bottom of Lamed Aleph Amid Beis. We learned yesterday a machlokes on Daf Lamed Aleph Amid Aleph. A machlokes between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. We're going to focus in on Rav. What happens if a nida that got pushed into a mikvah, let's call it Nensa V'Tavla, for she somehow ended up in a mikvah without any intention. So Rav said she's tahar. She could be with her husband, but she's not permitted to eat truma, because with truma, you needed focus to go into the mikvah. You just can't just pop into the mikvah. And Rabbi Yochanan says, no, even to your husband, you're not permitted. So now the Gemara on Daf Lamed Aleph Amid Beis just discusses that question. The question is, we had, the Gemara is linking it to a machlokes that we had regarding shchita. If someone, I don't know how it's possible, but it's possible. Anything in Chulin is possible. Throws a knife and shechts an animal. Throws a knife and shechts an animal. He meant to throw like an axe throw on a target, and in the air it shechted an animal. So Rab Nosson said it's a good shchita. You don't need kavana for shchita. And Rabbanan said, no, I know you don't need kavana for shchita, but you need kavana to cut the simanim at the very least. So it's not a good shchita. So the Gemara just concludes, what is the case of a nida that got forced and was toivel, and went into the mikvah? So, and that Rav said that the nida is permitted to be with her husband. Do you want to say that her friend pushed her into the mikveh and said toivel? If her friend oversees the mikveh and like pushes, like the mikveh lady pushed the lady into the mikveh, that would be a kosher tefillah, even no matter what your intention is. In such an event, you could even eat truma. It's now we learned in the Mishnah chareshes vashoita vasuma vashenitra vadata. It seems that nitra vadata, somebody who became incoherent, he lost his mind, she lost her mind, or an imbecile, or someone who was born mentally handicapped. If there's an intelligent woman overseeing their tefillah, she could go, he or she could go to the mikveh and eat truma. So we see that if someone else who is intelligent is involved in overseeing the person going into the mikveh, that should be good enough. So what is Rav telling me? Amar Papa says Rav is talking about Rav Nosson. According to Rav Nosson, a good example is Shenafla min hageshen. Nobody pushed her into the mikveh. She fell off a bridge and fell into a water. So in that case, there was no intention to even get wet. So that, according to Rav, if Rav linked himself with Rav Nosson, that would be a good mikveh going. Rabbanan, according to Rabbanan, another case would be Shiarda. She didn't. Nobody's overseeing it. Shiarda lahakir. She went to the water just to cool off, with no intention to become pure, to become tahar. So in those two cases, Rav would say that's an example of a woman that somehow ended up in a mikveh, and nobody's overseeing her. So Rav would say, as far as being with your husband, you're permitted to be with your husband. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava. Rava said, Shachat para v'shachat behema acherasima. Let's say someone shechted a cow, and he shechted another animal. So the paraduma along with another animal at the same time. So you know it's possible with a long knife you could shech two animals at the same time. So l'divrei hakol also, every psula, that would be a pasula paraduma. Why? Because the Torah tells you v'shachat oisa. You could only shecht one animal, one paraduma, not two animals at the same time. We go to Amid Aleph. Nishchata behema acherasima. Let's say another animal became shechted with it. So if it's somehow you were shechting the para aduma and another animal slipped in, and that wasn't your fault, so we know that you don't need kavana for shechita. So at the end of the day, if you shecht it, the para aduma along with this animal, this chulin animal that slipped in under the knife, so you accomplished the shechita with the chulin animal. So therefore, Rab Nasan, according to Rab Nasan, para psula behema kshera. The chulin animal is kosher because even if you didn't have intention to shecht it, because Rab Nasan holds even if you throw a knife at the wall, it's a kosher shechita. So the behema is kosher, the chulin animal is kosher, but the para aduma is pasal, as you can see in Rashi, because it says v'shochat oisa, that by para aduma it says you shecht it and not another animal with it. The Rabbanan, according to Rabbanan, para pshera pahema pasula. In that scenario, Rava teaches you that according to Rabbanan, since you didn't have kavana for the chulin animal, it just slipped under the knife. So then the behema, the chulin animal, has no shchita, it's pasal, and therefore the para aduma is kosher. Says the Gemara, pshita, this is obvious, so I don't need Rava to teach me this idea. If you don't understand the Rab Nasan and Rabbanan machlekes, you could apply it to other situations. And says the Gemara, Rava had to teach you that the other animal that slipped under the knife, according to Rab Nasan, would be it would be kosher animal, and the para would be pasal. Because why would I think the para would be kosher? I would have thought I would think that you shecht it and not another para aduma. But if you shecht another chulin animal, it would be kosher. So that would be kosher. So even according to Rab Nasan, if you nishach the behema cheresima, the para would be kosher. So that's why Rava had to say, according to Rab Nasan, no, b'shachat da'isa means you shecht one animal, and you can't shecht two animals at the same time when you're shechting the para aduma. Behechadami kagoin sheshachat shtei beheres paras b'hadei dodi. Aval behema d'chulin eloi kamash malan that even a behema b'chulin, it's still going to passel the para aduma. Now the Gemara says chotach delas ima divrei halkol psul. Let's say you're shechting the para aduma, and at the same time, with intention, you are shechting a cucumber. So imagine somebody shechting the para aduma, and at the same time, as he's slicing down, he's shechting a nice cucumber. So the para aduma is pasal. Now, you're not shechting another animal, so it's not because of a shachat oisa, it's because you're losing focus. When you don't have complete focus on the para aduma, that's also a problem. That's called hesach hadas. So therefore, since you're focusing not only on the para aduma, but also on the cucumber, so everybody would agree that it's possible. But nechtecha delas ima, but let's say the cucumber slipped in while you were shechting the para aduma, so you had no intention to shech the cucumber, then everybody holds it's a kosher para aduma, because you didn't lose focus of shechting the para aduma, and you only shechted one animal. You just shechted an animal with a cucumber, but you had no intention to shech the cucumber, so everybody would agree it's kosher. New Mishnah. Nafla sakin. Now we're talking about delays. In the middle of the shechita, you're not allowed to delay. So let's say a man is shechting, says the Mishnah, and the knife dropped from his hand, v'higbia, and he picked it up and continued the shechita. Or nafla kela v'higbia, or let's say his cell phone dropped while he picked it up. And then he paused in the middle of the shechita. So that's what we're dealing with, the pause. Let's say you sharpen the knife, and because you sharpened the knife, sharpening a knife was a big avodah, and therefore when you were shechting, you got tired in the middle of shechting. And your friend finished up the shechita. So what is called a shechita? What is called a pause? So the Mishnah says something that's ambiguous is shchita. If you waited enough time for a shchita, let's say the shchita of an animal takes you a minute, or the shchita of a bird takes you 30 seconds. So if you waited enough time of a shchita, that pause was that long, then the animal is disqualified. It's a pasal shchita. Rab Shimon says, Rab Shimon has a shorter test that he holds the pause has to be enough to check the knife. Checking a knife can take you 10 seconds. So Rab Shimon will say that if you pause like 10 seconds, already the shechita is invalid. So my Kedei Shchita, we're focusing on the Chachamim. What did the Chachamim mean that the pause has to be the amount to do another slaughtering? Rav says Kedei Shchitas Behem Acheres. The pause of being able to slaughter another animal. So on my example, let's say it takes you a minute to slaughter another animal. That's the amount. The question is, the pause for an animal will be the pause to shecht another animal. But would you say when it comes to a bird, the pause is a lot shorter to shecht a bird? So you'll have the psul of a pause will be 30 seconds by a bird. Or maybe even for a bird, the pause is the time that it would take an animal to shecht. So if you're in the middle of shechting a bird, the pause would be a minute, not 30 seconds. So Amalahu. So Rav said, you're right. That's a very good question. When you shecht a bird, what is the pause of a bird? And I wasn't in good terms with my Rebbe Reb Chia to ask him that question. So what's the bottom line? Itma we learned. Rav says, so the first Rav said that for an animal, if you're shechting an animal, the pause is the time it takes to shecht another animal. If you're shechting a bird, the pause is the time it takes you to shecht another bird. Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, even if you're shechting a bird, the pause is the time it takes you to shecht an animal. So it's a longer pause. Rabbi Yochanan agreed with Shmuel that the pause for a bird is the time it takes you to shecht another animal. Rab Chanina says he has a long pause. The time it takes you to go and bring an animal and shecht it. To bring an animal from the Gemara assumes you're going home to bring an animal from a marketplace and then shecht it. Says the Gemara, that means it could take you a half hour. That's the pause. Says Yovi Afil Me'alma, that you could bring the animal from somewhere else, then you're not giving a precise shear, because sometimes it could take you a half hour to get a brand new animal. Sometimes if the pen is nearby, it could take you 10 minutes to get another animal. So what did he mean anyway? Rab Chanina would give you a very long shear for a pause. Papa, now, to set it up, that would be the difference. Really, Rab Chanina agrees that like Rabbi Yochanan, let's say, that even the time it takes you to shecht an animal for a bird, but to shecht an animal, let's say it takes you a minute. Rab Chanina gives you a little bit more time. He says it's not enough the time to slaughter the animal. It's also you include the time it takes to put the animal in place to begin the slaughtering, assuming the animal is almost in place. So you add another certain amount of time, let's say 20 seconds, to that shear to put him in place. And that's the opinion of Chanina, which is a little bit longer than the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rabbi Mishmeid Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina. In my Rava, they said in the name of Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina, that means the shear is like here's the Oimedis Lahato, and all you got to do is put it on the ground, as you can see the picture. In this shear, Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina's shear is the animals on the ground. So the shear of pause would be to be able to lift an animal and then turn him over again, have him stand on his legs, then turn him over on the ground and do a shrita. So you get an extra like 2 minutes, according to that opinion. You have to lift him up and then put him back on the ground. That's the shear of pause. And it depends what type of animal. Daka to daka. For a light animal, the shear is the way to do that for a light animal. Begasa legasa, for a big animal, the shear would be for what it takes to do that for a big animal. Okay, so we have a bunch of different opinions of the pause. Rava now says a new idea. If someone shechs with a blunt knife, right? So it takes you a long time. It's not sharp. Even if he was moving the knife the entire day, it's still kosher. Says the Gemara, would Rava's question is, what happens? You have 10-second pauses and all through the shechita. a shechita that takes you 20 minutes and you had 10-second pauses. Do you combine all the 10-second pauses to create one 1-minute pause, which would invalidate the shechita or not? But since you didn't have it all in one a big pause in one shot, it doesn't combine. Says the Gemara, didn't Rava say you could shecht with a blunt knife the whole day? So obviously, maybe you had some pauses. No. Rava's point was hashoichet b'sakara means you didn't pause. Then it's kosher. But what happens if you did pause and you had a small pause, but a bunch of little small pauses? Rava remained with a question: can you combine it to invalidate the siman? Boya to invalidate the shechita. Boya Rav Huna asked the question. Breid Rav Nassim Shah b'miyat simonim maho teku. Here's an interesting question. You know you could shecht roiv of the simonim, but what happens? So once you shecht roiv of the simonim, presumably you have a kosher shechita. So you don't really need to shecht the miyat hasimonim, the extra minority left over. But let's say you did shecht it, so you're including the other part, the miyat hasimonim, the minority of the simon, as part of your shechita. And if you do a pause in that part, will that invalidate the shechita? Would you say that, I shechted roiv, so I have a good shechita, I don't care what about the miyut simonim? Or do you say, since the chatchila, you should shech the entire simon, so if you do a pause by the miyut simonim, although it's not the chatchila, that you, though it's not, b'diavad, if you didn't shech the miyut simonim, it's kosher, but if you do a pause by the miyut simonim, it would be invalid. Take the Gemara remains that question. Rab Shimon says the shear is so you could check the knife. 10 seconds. My kedei bikar. Rab Yochanan says kedei bikuri shel chacham. The amount of times that somebody who's an experienced knife checker could check the knife. So the Gemara assumed that you went to the rabbi to check the knife. That Rabbi Shimon didn't give you any time, because it depends where the rabbi lives. If the rabbi lives near your house, then the shia, the amount of the pause would be the time that you need to go back to the rabbi's house and have him check your knife. And if he lives near you, it's less time. No, Rabbi Shimon is very strict, assuming that the shaykhit is a chacham who knows how to check knives. How long would it take him to check a knife? Let's say 10 seconds. That's the amount of pause that would invalidate a shechita. New Mishnah. Now the Mishnah discusses regarding treifa and nevela. Remember, if an animal dies, it's a nevela, right? And it's metamayu. If the animal, let's say, had a puncture in its food pipe, right? And you shechted it, so even if it was treifa animal, it wasn't going to live for the year. If you shecht it, you do the kosher shechita on it, it's not a nevela anymore. It's a treifa, and it's not going to be metamayu. So, but that's only if you did a kosher shechita. What happens? You didn't do a kosher shechita. Shachar es aveshet. You did the first shechted the food pipe, upasak es hagegeres, and then the windpipe somehow disconnected by itself. So you only did a shechita on one siman, or the opposite. Upasak es hagegeres, the windpipe dislodged. Then you shechted the food pipe. Or you just shechted one pipe, and you didn't shecht both pipes. Or you shechted one pipe normally, and then you did a pasal shechita on the second pipe. You hid the knife and you just dislodged it. Bottom line is this considered a nevela or a treifa? You didn't do a kud shechita. So Rabbi Sheva, I'm a nevela. It's a nevela. Rabbi Kiva, I'm a treifa. It's treifa because you attempted to do a shechita that already would be metire this animal from being a nevela. So Klal Omer Rabbi Sheva, Bishum Rabbi Yeshua, Kol Shenifshala b'shchita say nevela. If it came disqualified during shchita, it's a nevela. That means if it came disqualified while you're shechting, then if it means you had not a good kosher shchita, then it's a nevela. But Kol Shchita Yukroi, Rabbi Sheva says the rule of thumb is if you had a normal shchita, v'dav la'akal garm lali pasul, something else caused it to become invalid. Let's say you shechted it normally, but then you find that there's a hole in the stomach or a hole in the lung, so then it's treifa. But if you don't have a normal shechita, it's nevela. And there, Rabbi Kiva agreed with Rabbi Yesheva. Says the Gemara. So Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Yesheva don't argue. If you don't have a kosher shechita, it's not a nevela. It's if you don't have a kodesh shechita, it's not a treifa, it's an avela. So if you shechted only one siman, and that was good, it's still an avela. Says the Gemara, uraminu. So I'm going to ask you a contradiction from our Mishnah to a Mishnah later on. Elu treifas behema. The following give a treifa in the animal. We go to Amid Beis. Nikuva savasha psikas hagargaras. The Mishnah says it's a treifa if the veshet had a hole and the windpipe was dislodged. Who holds it's a treifa? Rabbi Kiva agreed with Rabbi Yesheva that it's not a treifa, and yet that Mishnah says it's a treifa. So the Gemara gives you a teretz. Amar Rava, it's not a contradiction. What's the teretz? Amar Rava lekasha kan sheshachat umsayf pasuk. If you shecht and then you started a normal shita and then the second pipe just dislodged, like the gegeres, then it's an avela, right? Because you messed, the shchita was not a good shchita. You started a kosher, you didn't make a kosher shchita. Kan sheposek l'sayf shachat. If it dislodged first, okay? If it dislodged first, so what was left to shech? One normal pipe, and you shechted that normal pipe, then it's a treifa. That's what so it's not a stira. Says the Gemara, shachat umsayf pasak. If you tell me that if you shechted and then it came dislodged, it's an avela because nefselas b'shchiti, because it became possible during the shchita. So pasak l'sayf shachat, but if it came dislodged first, the pipe, the gageres, windpipe became dislodged, and then you shechted it, then you tell me it's a treifa. It's like as if you made a shchita and then you checked the stomach and you found there's a hole, so that's a treifa. So if the windpipe was dislodged and then you shechted it, so you shechted what was left to be shechted. So therefore, there was only one pipe to be shechted, the food pipe, right? So then it's only a treifa. So that's a big chiddush. Barahuna asked the question to Rava. That doesn't stem. Shachar is a beshet, pasak as a geres, pasak as a geres, machakach shachar as a beshet, nevela. Here, this brisa seems to say that even if the gegeres windpipe became dislodged, and then you shechted the veshet, the food pipe, so the dislodging came first, it's not a treifa. This brisa says clearly it's an avela. And you said, pasak l'psayf shachat, it's a treifa. So the Gemara says, Emo kva shachat is a veshet mikara. You have to read the brisa a little bit wrong. It's pasak as a gegeres, but what came first? You shachat as a veshet. That you shechted the veshet, and then the gegeres became dislodged. And that's what made it an avela. So that's how you read this brisa. Amalei, so Rav Acha said, that's not state trubish b'davar. That's not a good answer. I have two questions and gone your answer. Chada dahaini kamaisa. Because if that's the case, that's how you read the brisa, then that's how you read case number one. Shachar as a veshet or pasak as a gegeres. So the shchita came first and then the dislodging. And you're telling me that case number two is this basically the same thing. Pasak as a gegeres and the shchita of the veshet became first. So that's basically his case number one. But if you read these words, achakach, it seems that really the Bryce is talking about psikas gegeres, and then the beshet came. The psika came first, and then the shchita came first, and the Bryce calls it an avela. And you, Rava, called it a treifa. So your answer is not good, Rava. Elama Rava said like this: Elu asuris kanam. You're reading the Mishnah over there is a little funny. Really, the Mishnah doesn't call it a treifa of the kivas avasha psikas gegeres. The Mishnah says elu treifas. Yeah. The Mishnah says Eilu Asuris Ktari. This is how you read. The Mishnah says all these animals are Asur. Yeshmem Nevelas, Yeshmem Treifas. Some of them are Nevela, and some of them are Treifa. Says the Gemara, and it lists off things which are Nevela, and therefore Nekivas Abeshet Upsikas Gegeres would be a Nevela situation. Says the Gemara, if it's listing off Nevelas in that Mishnah, let's use Chizkiya's case as a Nevela. If you chop the hind of an animal, if you chopped off the hind of an animal in half, it's even though the animal is moving around, it's an Nevela. If the leg and its socket became just removed, even though if the animal is still jumping, it's an avela. And how come the Mishnah doesn't list that? The Mishnah seems to over there list punctures. And says the Gemara, right? Kikatani, the Mishnah over there is listing the Vela Deloy Mitam L'Chaim. Of the Vela Mitam L'Chaim, Loikatani. The Mishnah is over there is listing off nevelas that are not alive anymore. It's like not moving anymore. But a nevela that's Mitam L'Chaim, a nevela that's moving around, Loikatani, that's why it doesn't say it in that Mishnah. So Rava gave a good teretz. That really, Nekiva Saveshet, Psukas and Gegeres, is because Rabbi Kiva agreed with Rabbi Yesheva, that's not an avela. The Mishnah calls it a treifa. You're reading the Mishnah wrong. The Mishnah is listing off things that are nevelas also. Concludes the Gemara. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish oimer kan sheshacha b'soicha mokam chatach kan b'shmokam shaloi b'mokam chatach. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, because you know the teretz that in our Mishnah you shechted, like you can see in the picture, where in the place of here in the top picture over here, you shechted in the place where it had a hole. If it had a cut that cut most of the windpipe, let's say, so it's a puzzle, it's a treifa animal. If you shech there, then it became that's what our mission is talking about. And there it's talking about you shechted not in the place where it had the cut earlier. So we said like this. If you shecht in the place where it was cut, then it's an avela. If you shecht in a new place where it's not totally cut, then it's a treifa. If you shecht not in the area that it was originally cut, then it's a treifa, and it's as if you shechted a normal shchita, and something else caused it to become possible. So if you look at the picture, if you shecht not in the area that it was totally, mostly cut, remember it's treifa over here, but if you shecht in a brand new area on the pipe, and then you shecht the food pipe, so then it's as if you shecht in a normal shchita, and you found that there's a hole in the lung or something like that. So that would be a treifa. That's what that mission is talking about. Says the Gemara, that's not true. Umi Amar Rab Shimon ben Lakish, Hachiv Amar Shimon Lakish Shachis, says Kana ba'achach nichva reya kshera alma commanda mancha b'dikula dame. Hachinami commanda mancha b'dikula dame. The Gemara doesn't understand the teretz because we're going to learn about it tomorrow. But the bottom line is that the windpipe, once it has a cut, a total cut of most of the windpipe, right? As you can see in the picture, we should ignore as if the windpipe doesn't exist. And Rosh Lakish says that opinion. So once you have that opinion, so who cares if you shechted in another area where it wasn't cut, but we're just going to ignore the windpipe, and all you shechted was a food pipe. So it should not make it a treifa, it should still remain an avela. So concludes the Gemara, that the new teretz, the teretz is that the Mishnah in Elu Treifis was actually Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva, before he regretted he turned around his position, held that in a shchita, even if you do one pipe, you already make it ois nevela. Even if you do one pipe. And therefore, that Mishnah could liberally say, if you shecht one pipe, and you shecht one pipe, and normally, and then you find a hole in the other pipe, or the windpipe was dislodged, but as long as you shecht one pipe, it's a treifa. But that was Rabbi Kiva's original opinion. But Rabbi Kiva turned around his opinion. He says that it's always going to be an avela. The only time it's going to be a treifa is if you have a normal shchita. There's no problem with the two pipes. You shecht it normally, and then you find, let's say, a hole in the brain or something like that. So then there you had a normal shchita of two normal pipes, and you find a psul somewhere else. That would be considered a treifa, and that's what our Mishnah is discussing. Okay, we'll stop over here.